Engineering 120 robot, you will need the robot kit, a USB cable, the Engineering 120 accessories kit, a breadboard, and a UC32 kit. To start, we will take the robot and start assembling it. You will get 2 servos and a battery pack. Also, the fasteners and connectors are in the secondary pouch with the wheels. First thing to do is install the grommet. Open your package. For this installation, you'll need a Phillips screwdriver, number 1, a slot screwdriver, and it comes with a little wrench to do all the tightening. The nylon screws that come in the package are for mounting your battery pack. Save those until further along. Put the grommet in. What the grommet does is it protects your wires from your servos and light sensor and other things from being cut by the sharp aluminum. Grommet is now in. Next thing to put on is your servos. You'll need 440 by 1/4 inch screws that come with the kit. You will need 4 for each servo. Your servo installed with the adjustment screw facing forward. Makes it easier to adjust on a later step. This is where the wrench comes in very handy. First servo's in. Run your wire through the grommet and out. Now let's install the second servo. Another trick while you're doing this is to have a piece of painter's tape and mark which side the servo is. If it's your right servo, left servo. Now with your servos installed, with both of your adjustment screws facing forward, let's now install the battery pack. Some kits do come with a 5 battery pack, others do come with a 4 battery. It's just luck of the draw. To install this, we need to make sure that the holes line up like that. This is where the nylon screws come into play. And 2 nuts. First, before you install your part, it's easier to run the power through the grommet. Now to the assembly. What the plastic screw does is it prevents from causing any drain off from the battery, from conducting between the metal. This is where you'll use a flat blade or slot screwdriver. And your battery holder is now in place. Next, let's assemble the back end. There will be a cotter pin and a rolling ball. Put it through. Does not matter which side you run the cotter pin. Put the part through. And bend the tabs on the cotter pin. Now your ball is ready to roll. Also, for the wheels, take the large rubber band, place it in between the tracks. This gives you additional grip on our test track. Now to put on the wheels. Again, switch to your number 1 Phillips. Remove the cross. Save the cross for later. We will use these parts. Put them in the accessories kit bag. It's a safe place to keep it. Also, save the screw. You will reuse that screw. The wheel backside is knurled along with the servo, so they should just slide on. Take the screw and reattach. The basic framework is now complete. Now let's move on to the parts that require the accessory kit. The base for your Uno 32 and your breadboard. Peel off the paper cover. This protects the acrylic. For your robot, we will want to face the chip in the back, the breadboard up front. So we now have these aluminum spacers. We'll now attach them to the frame and to the piece of acrylic. Those use the 3/8 long bolts or machine screws. Now with all 4 spacers in, we can attach the top plate. Goes into the top of the aluminum spacers. With the 2 longer screws and 2 of the nylon spacers, we will attach the UC32 chip, or Uno 32 for the older versions. Take your screw, your nylon spacer, your aluminum spacer, go into the top hole with your wrench, take one of the nylocks. Now take your screw, your spacer, and you can do this with it hanging over the edge, and then your aluminum spacer, move them into position. And then take your nylock and attach it. And this time it's also a good time to move your wiring up through the servo motor controls will go to the front, the battery pack can go to the back, so that way it is able to be plugged in when running your robot off of battery power. Again, needle nose come in very handy for this part. Next step is to attach your breadboard. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered. This just makes it so we can attach wires. Also, when setting your robot up during class, works best to set it off the back wheel, so that way the chip is not being hit, nor the light sensor that we attach at a later point. For your kit, there are two different power sources supplied by the UC32. There's 3.3 volt, which we'll use to run our light sensor, which typically is on the left side of the board, and our 5 volt, which will run the servos on the right side of the board. So let's start. When you get your kit, you'll get male-to-male connectors for the board. Place those in slot 2F, and then take your right or left servo motor control wire and place them on the male-to-male. So what we will do is take a red jumper wire, which is typical for power, into the 5.5, or sorry, excuse me, the 5.0 slot, into power, to the positive slide. Then we will take a black, which is typical of ground, from ground on the UC32 to the ground. Then we will take red from 3.3 to the left side, and ground to the left side ground, which is negative. Power's positive, ground negative. Wire snips are also handy to use for taking some of the jumper wires and cutting in half and making smaller jumpers. After you've stripped a couple jumpers, to red on the power side. For each servo. And then you take your ground wire from the ground on the servo to the ground on the breadboard. Then you take a section of wire. Typically I like to use the white wire since that's what the control wire is for the servo. Cut a couple sections. Again, strip the ends. Go to the white control. And it goes to pin 30, which is the second pin on the inside, and pin 31, respectively, for right and left servo. Taking the second control wire for the other servo, plugging it in, matching the white wire, and running to slot 31. There are the two control wires for the servos plugged into the two inputs, or actually outputs. Your right servo motor is connected into pin 30. Your left servo motor is connected into pin 31. Now to do the light sensor. Tilt your robot up, grab your light sensor holder, peel off the paper, take your 440 by 1/4 inch screws using your wrench, and screw in your light sensor. After your light sensor bracket's been mounted, take your light sensor, which comes with the kit, your 440 by 1/2 screw, and the spare regular 440 hex nut, and attach your light sensor. You run it through the bottom bar. Then adjusting later on your depth to where you get your best values. We'll do that further on in the weeks of the class. Then making sure that you have orange wire facing forward, put it in a corresponding vertical slot. Mine, for example, is in 3. Row D. You will also need to take, this time, your 2 resistors. It does help to trim your resistors. The 2 resistors that we have tonight for assembly is a 470 ohm resistor, which is a yellow, purple, brown, and gold, which goes to the green wire and to the negative terminal. Then we have our 20K ohm resistor, which goes from the blue wire to negative. And then take 2 jumpers and go from the orange wire to the positive terminal. And then take your red wire from the white wire spot on the light sensor to positive. When doing your resistor for the 20K ohm or 20,000 ohm, make sure you leave an open source for your light sensor reading to go to pin A5. We typically use the yellow wire to do that transition. Now take your wire from the blue pin on the light sensor to A3 on the board, which starts at 0. So you go 0, 1, 2, 3. And your robot is complete.